Okay, before we start, quick content warning for mentions of suicide, self-harm, and bullying. Hey, so first off, this is Lex 16 here. This video is going to be about switching hosts, specifically our experience with switching hosts. Just a disclaimer before I get into this. This is about our experience. Different systems may experience switching hosts in a different way than we do. So first off, if you don't know what a system host is, a host is the alter who fronts the most and may or may not feel connected to the body. So there's a lot to cover with our experience, so I guess I'm going to start with explaining how we first noticed we had switching hosts before we even knew what a system was. As an OSDD-1B system, we experience emotional amnesia, which is when you remember something but don't feel any emotional attachments to the memory. Almost like it's someone else's memory, and if you're a system, it actually is. Now, we experienced this unknowingly throughout our childhood. Whoever the host was in 6th and 7th grade noticed not feeling connections to memories from before the last year or so. Then in 8th grade, whoever was host noticed the same thing. We repeatedly noticed this until we found out we were a system, and even then we still didn't know we had switching hosts for a while. So because I feel emotionally disconnected from really anything that happened before this August or so, because that's when I split, I might not have the best memories of stuff and what the host was feeling at the time, but I do believe that this particular phenomenon happened before our freshman year. We experienced bullying in middle school, and when we decided on a high school, it was an art school because the host at the time wanted to pursue a career in classical music, specifically violin. However, no one we knew was going to that school, including our one best friend, and basically because of the bullying and because of the host's interest in pursuing a classical music career, we basically told our dad, I don't want to have friends, I'm not going to go to any clubs, I'm not going to interact with any people, I'm going to spend lunch in the music room practicing violin, and I'm going to focus on school. Because of this phenomenon, I believe that we had a host in 8th grade who was dealing with bullying and went dormant because of the trauma of bullying. For those of you who don't know what dormant means, it's basically when an alter just is no longer active. They're not dead, they're still there, they're just not really active in the system anymore. And yes, alters can go in and out from being dormant. When we started our freshman year, the host was an entirely new person, one who didn't actually deal with the trauma and didn't want to deal with it again. So they just said, nope, no more people, I am cutting people out of my life because people bully me, and that's bad. Although this was very unconscious because we didn't actually know we were being bullied, which was probably a defense mechanism because it was easier to just not think that it was bullying than actually recognizing that we were being treated like shit. Now, as our freshman year went on, we did exactly what we said we were going to do. We didn't make friends, didn't interact with people, sat by ourselves at lunch and practiced violin when we were done. This did not work out for us. And then came the depression. It started out small with not enjoying things we usually enjoyed, having little energy or interest in things, and when we noticed it, we started seeing a therapist in January of 2020. At this point, we had been getting into the Beatles, so we called the host from that time Beatles Lex. I'll explain the name situation later. Eventually, our depression just got worse, and we started to get suicidal and had self-harm urges. Then we attempted suicide twice, and the second time ended up in the hospital. I don't know if that is when Beatles Lex went dormant, because I can't really remember, but I do remember that at some point in 2020 we just completely lost interest in the Beatles. And at first we thought it was just coming out of a hyperfixation, but we could still tell that something was off. It was almost like their music wasn't interesting to us anymore. Even though Beatles Lex had a very strong emotional attachment to the Beatles, the next host just didn't. And then we got into the Prague Phase. If you don't know what Prague is, it's basically just weird-ass hippie music, but not psychedelia. Sometimes it's like jazz, and sometimes it's like orchestra, and sometimes it's just neither. So we still didn't know we were a system yet, but at that point, the host decided to start going by the name Sid, as well as Lex, and so now we just refer to them as Sid. And yeah, they named themselves after Sid Barrett. Anyways, after a bit, something must have happened. I don't know what it would have been. Maybe another hospitalization, maybe our trip to residential, who knows. But then came the Goth Phase and the Glam Phase, which I forget which one comes first, but it doesn't really matter because they both kind of blend into each other. So around the time of our Goth Phase, someone showed up who may have been the host at the time, but they may also have just been an alter that we didn't realize was an alter. Either way, A is still around, Z is gender fluid and uses the names Zephyr and Lowly. I am into glam, just not as emotionally attached to most of the bands as Glam Lex was. I think Glam Lex was around until we found out we were a system. When we did find out we were a system, we had this friend who started being ableist to us, and eventually we had to cut him out of our life, which caused us to switch hosts, and now I'm here. Since most of our hosts have gone by the name Lex, we have indicators for each of us. We have Beatles Lex, Glam Lex, and Lex 16, which is me, and then we just call Prague Lex Sid because it's easier. The pattern that seems to show up with our switching hosts starts out with a new host who spends some time in the system, doesn't feel emotionally connected to stuff that happened before they split. Then we go through some sort of trauma, and a new host splits. This new host doesn't feel emotionally connected to the interests of the previous host, and doesn't feel emotionally connected to any of the memories they shared either. And the pattern repeats. Anyways, if you stick around with our channel for a while, you'll probably see us switch hosts more. Again, not all systems are going to have the same experiences with switching hosts. I just thought it might be cool to share our experience and see if maybe someone relates. Thank you for watching.